Jazak. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي ونسلم على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. The Battle of Badr took place in the second year Hijri Ramadan al-Mubarak. The next, after the Battle of Badr, which finished in the month of Ramadan also, a few events took place before the next major battle which took place in Islam, which was the Battle of Uhud. The Battle of Uhud took place in Shawwal, 3rd year Hijri. So approximately just over a year. So within that year there were certain incidents, events which took place during the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which inshallah we would like to discuss. So there are three main things we can categorize. First thing is the Ghazawat and the Saraya, which took place after the Battle of Badr. Ghazawat meaning those battles in which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself participated in, and Saraya means the battles in which he sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself didn't participate in, rather just sent a group of Sahaba Kiram radiyallahu ta'ala anhum. So the Ghazawat and the Saraya. And the second thing is that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam dealt with the mischief within Medina Munawwara. Certain incendiary individuals who would cause problems and ignite the flame and fire of enmity between the inhabitants of Medina Munawwara and even beyond, and wishing to create that disunity, create havoc, mayhem amongst the Muslims and in Medina Munawwara in general. So the Prophet ﷺ dealing with them. And the third thing is other social occasions of somewhat importance which took place during this period of time. So the very first thing is the Ghazawat and the Saraya. In terms of the Ghazawat and Saraya, there were a number of Ghazawat which took place. The first one being Qarqara al-Qudr. The second one being the Ghazwa of Banu Qaynuqa. The third one being the Ghazwa of Sawiq. The fourth one being the Ghazwa of Ghatfan. The fifth one Buhran. And the sixth one the Zayd ibn Haritha. Zayd ibn Haritha wasn't actual Ghazwa. That was a Sariyah, in which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself didn't participate and sent the Sahaba Kiram radiyallahu ta'ala anhum on a particular mission under the commandership of Sayyidina Zayd ibn Haritha radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, which is why it is called the Sariyah of Zayd ibn Haritha. So the very first one was Ghazwa of Qarqara al-Qudr. This took place beginning of Shawwal. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had just returned from Medina Munawwara, and 1 week, just 1 week, he sallallahu alaihi wasallam had spent in Medina Munawwara, when all of a sudden the need arose and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam set out on an expedition. This expedition was called Qarqara al-Qudr. Qarqara is a name given to like a water spring, and Qudr was the actual name. So Qarqara al-Qudr meaning the Ghazwa of the water of Qudr, and that's where the actual Ghazwa took place. So the Ghazwa was in the vicinity of that water, which was called Qudr. So that's why this battle is called Qarqara al-Qudr. The reasons for this battle was that the Muslims had just finished the battle of Badr. After finishing the battle of Badr, he sallallahu alaihi wasallam with the Sahaba Kiram radiyallahu anhum returned back to Medina Munawwara. Meanwhile, there was a group in the north, the Ghatfan and the Banu Sulaym. They thought to themselves, they were hostile enemies, and they thought that, look, the Muslims have just faced the Quraysh. They must be exhausted. They must be weak. So let us go and use this opportunity. They were trying from before anyway, had mind, but they thought this is a good time. And they thought, let us use this as an opportunity to launch an assault against the Muslims in Medina Munawwara. So their objective was to stop the Muslims establishing and finding their footing in the Muslims' lands and in the city of Medina Munawwara. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was informed. He came to know of this, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam responded not by sitting, but rather Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, look, the best form of defense is attack. Let us go and let us show our strength. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, from this firstly we understand is the importance Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had, which we have learned previously many a times as well, which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave to intelligence and gathering information. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam came to know, they were there, they could have launched a surprise attack, and for them, they probably thought that they were going to launch a surprise attack. But Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was constantly fully aware. Surveillance, intelligence, he sallallahu alaihi wasallam had everything covered. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was informed that this is what they are preparing. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam didn't think, okay, what shall we do? We've just, got back, let us rest a bit. No. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam wanted to respond decisively, and he sallallahu alaihi wasallam wanted to quash any threats that could come upon the Muslims in Medina Munawwara. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he exhibited his leadership, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam wanted to ensure the stability and the security of Medina Munawwara. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, with a group of 200 Sahaba Kiram radiyallahu ta'ala anhum, went out and came to the place where the Banu Sulaym and the Banu Ghatfan were gathering. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he arrived there, then the enemy forces, they retreated and they fled. They got afraid and they left. So from this we also understand that sometimes a military expedition needs to take place even though there might not be any direct combat, just to assert your authority and to show your force. Look, we are here. We're not just quiet individuals just sitting in a little corner. No, we are here and we're going to stay here, and don't try to threaten us in any way, because we will stand up for ourselves. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam went out. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam went out with the Sahabi Kiram radiyallahu ta'ala anhum. As always, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam would always keep somebody in his position. When he would leave Medina Munawwara, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam kept the Sahabi by the name of either Abdullah ibn Maktoum radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, as mentioned, as was the case also at the time of Badr as well, or Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam kept the Sahabi Sabah ibn Urfuta radiyallahu ta'ala anhu in that position. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in regards to the army, he sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave the flag to Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he went there, then the enemy fled and they took refuge in the mountains. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam remained there for 3 days. He didn't just immediately return back. He remained there for 3 days, making sure that they don't try to attack us again when we go back. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam remained there for 3 days. And in this state of fleeing, they left behind their camels. And the shepherd that was looking after the camels as well, the herder rather. So the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam took the camels and also took their slave, whose name was Yasar. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, after 3 days, returned to Medina Munawwara with these camels and with their slave Yasar. The camels were 500 in number. As mentioned previously, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, from the mal al-ghanima, from the spoils of war, he sallallahu alaihi wasallam would get a share of 1/5, and the remaining 4/5 would be distributed amongst the participants of the battle. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam took 1/5, which was 100 camels. And obviously, when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam took them, that means that he sallallahu alaihi wasallam would take it for the ummah and the Muslim community generally, lil masakin, etc. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam took these 100 camels and distributed among the poor, and the remaining 400 were distributed amongst those that participated in the battle. There were 200, so each and every one of them got 2 camels each, and they in this way returned back to Medina Munawwara. The next battle was the battle and the Ghazwa of Qaynuqa. This took place 15th Shawwal. So now still Ramadan, after Ramadan 2 weeks, and within those 2 weeks you've just had the Ghazwa of the Qarqara al-Kurd, which took place, or which also named as Ghazwa Banu Sulaym. So that one took place. So just you could say about a week after that, this Ghazwa took place. Now this Ghazwa was with the Banu Qaynuqa. The Banu Qaynuqa was the tribe of the Banu Israel that had settled in Medina Munawwara. They were Arabs and they had settled in Medina Munawwara. And as we've discussed previously, that one of the very first things that the Prophet ﷺ did when he came to Medina Munawwara to establish the city and to ensure that everything runs smoothly is that he wrote up the very first manifesto, treaty, and you could say the law of the land, in which he ﷺ reached out to the different tribes in Medina Munawwara and made them all agree to this, that look, you will have your liberties, you will have your freedoms, you can have your freedom of religion, etc., everything, and we will look after you, but the condition is that, number one, you look after us, meaning you don't do or have any hostilities with us, and you don't harass the Muslims, you don't conspire against the Muslims. And similarly, if there's any threat externally which comes upon Medina Munawwara, you will stand shoulder to shoulder and help us defend that threat and repel it and safeguard the boundaries of our city. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam wrote up this charter, And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam wrote up this agreement, and he sallallahu alaihi wasallam got it signed by the different tribes which were in Medina Munawwara. One of the tribes was Banu Qaynuqa, and the historians and the Arbab al-Siyar, the ulama, write that hum awwalu man naqadu ma bainahum wa bain Rasulillahi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They were the very first people who went against their word and broke this treaty. So the Banu Qaynuqa, they were quite courageous, strong, and daring as well. And because of their power and their position, they weren't happy at the Muslims and the fact that they've got a strong footing within Medina Munawwara. So constantly they would always cause issues with the Muslims, the Sahaba Kiram radiyallahu ta'ala anhum, specifically the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam as well. They were actually the tribe of Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Salam radiyallahu ta'ala. He was from this tribe as well. And their trade was goldsmiths. They were all goldsmiths. And they were quite wealthy because of this reason as well. So wealthy, powerful, strong, large tribe, courageous. And now you've got Muslims, migrants, have come into the country, city. Now they've got a strong footing. They're not going to be happy at this, and they weren't happy at this, and they weren't willing to accept the leadership of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So constantly they would cause issues with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he actually addressed them once as well, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam went to them in the market, and he sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to them that, look, Banu Qaynuqa, just calm down, get grip of yourselves, don't be too audacious, don't get too courageous and daring. And then it so happened that a specific incident took place, and at that moment the way they responded to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was, this was after Badr. This is after Badr as well. So their response to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was that don't get too overconfident, and don't think that we will be a pushover like the Quraysh. If you want, come into the battlefield, then you'll see who are the men, and you'll find out that actually now we're facing a battle. This was the response they gave to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Obviously, this wasn't a very appropriate response, but then there was one specific incident which triggered everything. The incident was that there's a Muslim woman who went into the market of Banu Qaynuqa. And after going into the market of Banu Qaynuqa, she was looking at some jewelry, etc. When there were a few men there present from the Banu Qaynuqa. And they approached her, and they started to flirt with her, and they started to harass her, and they started to say things to her, inappropriate comments, etc., inappropriate advances. And she obviously brushed them aside, tried to ignore them. And then what happened then was that one individual, he very quietly and stealthily got a piece of her clothing and tied it up with something, and she didn't notice. So what happened was that when she then stood up to walk away, then her cloth that was covering her was removed and it exposed her. And when she was exposed, and obviously she was really embarrassed, taken aback, she started to scream. There was a Muslim there who then at that moment quickly came and heard her screaming and came to her help and beat up that man who did this to her. In retaliation of that, he got ganged up upon the group of the individual from the Banu Qaynuqa, and they killed him. After they killed him, then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam came to know of this, that this is what has been happening. Everything has been brewing up now for a while. It's been 2 years that they've been in Medina Munawwara. And things have been brewing up slowly. They've not let the Muslims settle. They've always caused issues, caused problems here and there. And then they've started to get, quite upfront and aggressive towards Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam saw this incident take place, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that's it. Enough is enough now. There's only so much that we can tolerate and forgive and forget. Now it's becoming too much now. If we are to take the back seat, then they'll think that we're not going to do anything, and their problems will increase and their hostilities will get intensified. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam immediately started to make his way towards the Banu Qaynuqa. Now if you look at the map of Medina Munawwara here, then this is how generally the tribes were settled within Medina Munawwara. I don't know how clear it is. It seems pretty clear to a certain degree. So here was the Masjid al-Nabawi, and this is obviously where the majority of the Sahaba Kiram radiyallahu ta'ala anhum, and specifically Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was residing. His houses were obviously adjacent to the masjid. Here were the Banu Qaynuqa, and then you've got the other tribes as well. Banu Qurayza were also from the Banu Israel. Then you had the Banu Nadir here, the Banu Nadir, the Banu Qurayza, and Banu Qaynuqa. Here is the castle of Ka'b ibn al-Ashraf. Remember that name. That name will come in a few, maybe not today, but possibly next week or the week after. Ka'b ibn al-Ashraf. So Ka'b ibn al-Ashraf's castle was over here. His house, his dwelling was over here. And then you had the other Muslim tribes here. The Aus were generally here. The Khazraj were generally on this side. So these were all the Khazraj tribes. These were all the Aus tribes, and these were the Banu Israel, 1, 2, and 3. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, along with the Sahaba Kiram radiyallahu ta'ala, marched towards the Banu Qaynuqa and would then deal with them accordingly. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told them that, look, it's better if you accept Islam. If you accept Islam, understand, you've got problems, we can be on one footing, and that's fine. Because you all know, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to them, you all know that I'm a prophet. You know that I'm a prophet. They all understood, but they didn't accept. They all had this issue, and that was the main problem, the jealousy which prevented them from accepting the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the wife of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Safiya, who was the daughter of Huyay ibn al-Akhtab, the leaders of the Banu Israel, one of the tribes. She herself states that I was very, very dear to my father and my uncle, very dear to them. She then obviously accepted Islam and became a Muslim. So she says, I was very, very dear to my father and my uncle, very dear. And none amongst the children had that position which I had. And nobody could get their attention more than I could get. She says that one day when the Prophet ﷺ came to Medina Munawwara, so he was still in Kuba. He says, my uncle and my father, they both went to Kuba to see Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And she says that when they returned during the night, they were really, really anxious, agitated, exhausted, and they were just murmuring to one another. And she says that I came in front of them and I said, I greeted them and I tried to get their attention, but they just carried on straight past me, meaning they were so much overcome by emotions that they didn't even notice that I was there. And I could immediately catch their attention. But such were their emotions at that time. And it says that they settled and they were there talking and I was listening to them. And then they said, oh, is that him? My uncle asked my father, is that him? So my father replied, yes, it is him. She said, what? As in, he's the prophet that's been prophesied in our books? So he said, yes, that is him. So then my uncle asked my father, so what are we going to do then? So then my father goes, that by Allah, I am never, ever, ever going to believe in him. And I am going to oppose him till I die. So that was the condition of the situation at that time. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, look, you know that I'm a prophet, accept it. So they said no. They said no. And when they found out that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has left Medina Munawwara, then they immediately rushed into their fort and they closed and secured their fort where they were staying. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam appointed Sayyidina Abu Lubaba radiyallahu ta'ala anhu in Medina Munawwara, and they then, with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, along with the Sahaba Kiram radiyallahu ta'ala anhum, started to march towards Mecca, towards Banu Qaynuqa. When they came towards Banu Qaynuqa, they found out that they have taken refuge in their fort. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, okay, you're not going to accept? So they said no. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, okay, that's fine. And then he instructed the Sahaba Kiram radiyallahu ta'ala anhum to lay siege. So they surrounded the fort. They surrounded the fort and they didn't allow anybody to leave, and neither could anybody go inside. And this siege started on the 15th of Shawwal, and this continued for 15 days. 15 days the Sahaba Kiram radiyallahu anhu remained there. And finally, on the 16th day, the Banu Qaynuqa eventually surrendered. They were unable to stay inside because obviously they didn't have access to anything outside, and neither did anybody outside have access and could do anything for them. So they felt compelled to, come out of their fort, and coming out of their fort would mean fighting. And up until now, they were saying that if you want to fight, fight us. But such fear and awe overtook them and was instilled in their hearts that they just thought to themselves, we can't fight the Muslims. There's no chance we are going to beat them. And they immediately surrendered. Once they were surrendered, and it came out. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam instructed that their men be tied up. So the men were tied up. After the men were tied up, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam initially said that, okay, execute all of them. Execute all of them. So whilst they were tied up, they had obviously inroads with other tribes and other groups. So one of the individuals who had good, who was good allies with them was none other than Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Salul. Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Salul was known as Ra'isul Munafiqeen, the leader of the hypocrites. His issue was that he was going to become the leader of Medina Munawwara. And the Aus and the Khazraj, they both looked up to him. And he would have been the one who would have taken leadership of Medina Munawwara. It so happened that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was destined to come to Medina Munawwara. That then took him off the pedestal, and because of that, he couldn't digest the fact that why not me and why him? That he just couldn't. So because of this, he initially had open enmity with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. After Badr, then the Muslims had the upper hand. Now, the Quraysh had been defeated. So now what they decided is they changed their tactics. And they now started to harm the Muslims from inside. They became the enemy within. They became Muslims from the outside, but inside they had not even an iota of Islam within them. They were pure hypocrites. No Islam whatsoever. Their objective was to break the roots of Islam from the bottom. So when he realized that, look, this has happened with the Banu Qaynuqa, so he went there and he saw that one Sahabi was instructed to look after the individuals that were captured. So he came to him and he said to him, untie them. Now he was a leader, and what he would say would go. That was a status quo. But now Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had that position, so he was still under this superior complex and thought to himself that I'm going to say it, it's going to happen. So he said, untie him. So he looked at him and he says, you want me to untie that which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam have told me to tie? No chance. No. And then he says, untie him now, I said. So he says, you even come close to them and I'll strike your neck. Don't you dare. So then he thought, okay, I need to go up to the top now. So he came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So because what it was that his tribe was very close to the Banu Qaynuqa. There was another Sahabi by the name of Ubadah ibn Samit radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. He was from the Ansar. His tribe was also very close to the Banu Qaynuqa. So Banu Qaynuqa thought that these two will somehow assist us. So what he did, Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Salul, he went to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Ubadah ibn Samit radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he also went to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Ubadah ibn Samit radiyallahu ta'ala anhu states to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that, Ya Rasulullah, atawalla Allahu wa Rasulah. I have befriended Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Any other associations, any other friendships, broken for the sake of Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. وَأَبْرَأُ مِنْ حَلْفِ هَؤُلَاءِ الْكُفَّارِ وَوُلَايَتِهِمْ. He says, no, I've broken ties with them. Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Salul comes and he says to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ya Muhammad, ahsin fiyya mawaliya. He says, look, these are my allies, so you deal with them nicely for my sake. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam ignored him. He then came back to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and said, Ya Muhammad, ahsin fiyya mawaliya. Oh Muhammad, these are my allies. For my sake, deal with them in a nice way. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam again turned away from him, ignored him. He then came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and grabbed him. And he put his hand inside the cloth of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he grabbed him from inside like this. And then he repeated it again. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told him, Arsilni, let go of me. He didn't let go. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said again, and he got a bit angry this time. He said, Arsilni. He said, let go of me. So when he saw the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam getting angry, then he replied, La wallahi, la ursiluk. She says, no, I am not going to let you go, by Allah, until hatta tuhsina fiyya mawali, until you do not deal with them properly and you do not favor them. So now he had taken the name of Allah. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam at that moment just didn't say anything, and then he then said, look, you've got 700 people here, all tied up. Some of them don't even have armor. 300 of them have armor. And then these are those very people who have constantly watched my back and safeguarded me. Mana'uni min al-ahmari wal-aswad. They didn't let anybody attack me. And now you just want to come along and wipe them all out? I'm not going to allow that. He said that to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam at that moment looked at him and he said, hum lak. Okay, they're all yours. They're all yours. That's what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said. And then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam walked away. After Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that they're all yours, and he sallallahu alaihi wasallam walked away, then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam just didn't stop there. What then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did was just let him get a little bit happy and get him off the case of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and off his back. Then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam instructed Muhammad ibn Maslama that you now are in charge, and the instruction is that they now need to leave Medina Munawwara. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he exiled them from Medina Munawwara. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, they have 3 days, and they have to leave Medina Munawwara. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told Muhammad ibn Maslama radiyallahu ta'ala an to carry out this task. So Muhammad ibn Maslama radiyallahu anhu went to them and said, look, this is the decision from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You now have to leave Medina Munawwara, and you have 3 days. They then turned to him and they said, please give us a bit more time. Give us a bit more time. He said, I am not going to even give you an hour more. Your time has started. You've got 3 days. You need to leave Medina Munawwara. And in this way, the whole of Banu Qaynuqa, they all were exiled from Medina Munawwara, and the hostilities that the Prophet ﷺ and the Muslims were facing because of these individuals, Rasulullah ﷺ was had that bit of rest and that bit of freedom from this. And because of the fact that they had to leave, so everything they left behind, whatever they could take with them, they took, but everything that they left behind was taken as mal ghanima. Majority of them, some of them moved on to Syria, etc., but the majority of them went and settled in a place called Khaybar. And they then settled there. Because of this incident, the other 2 tribes, they kind of calmed down as well. Because Banu Qaynuqa was the strongest. Banu Qaynuqa was the largest. And when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had them exiled, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam dealt with them, then immediately they thought, if that's what can happen to them, what will happen to us? So they were also constantly harassing the Muslim, causing issues. So immediately they said, look, let's settle down, let's be quiet now, and let's not do anything. So in this way, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam sent a message to the wider community that, look, we want to live in peace, and we want you to live in peace, and we don't want any hostilities. But if you cause problems, we don't have any other choice but to deal with the issue, because we can't jeopardize our own safety and our own security. In this way, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam then dealt with them, and he once again allowed the environment of Medina Munawwara to be a bit more peaceful and at ease. There are a few other ghazawat also which took place. Inshallah, we'll continue from there. Inshallah, next week we'll cover the ghazwa of Sawiq. Inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Salamun ala ibadihi alladhina istafa. Salamun ala al-mursalin. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى ال محمد وانزل مقدم وقرب عند اللهم رب هذه الدعوه القامه والصلاه النافعه صل على محمد ووضع عني رضا الله رزقته بعده وبدا اللهم صل على محمد عبده ورسوله وصل على المؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات اللهم صل على محمد وعلى ال محمد وبارك على محمد وعلى ال محمد وارحم محمد وعلى محمد كما صليت وباركت ورحمت على ابراهيم وعلى ال ابراهيم انك حميد مجيد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى ال محمد كما صليت على ال ابراهيم انك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى ال محمد كما باركت على ال ابراهيم انك حميد مجيد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى ال محمد كما صليت على آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى ال محمد كما صليت على ابراهيم انك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى ال محمد كما باركت على ال ابراهيم انك حميد مجيد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى ال محمد كما صليت على ال ابراهيم وبارك على محمد وعلى ال محمد كما باركت على ال ابراهيم في العالمين انك حميد مجيد اللهم صل على محمد وازواجه وذريته كما صليت على ال ابراهيم وبارك على محمد وبارك على محمد وازواجه وذريته كما باركت على ال ابراهيم انك حميد مجيد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى ازواجه وذريته كما صليت على آل إبراهيم وبارك على محمد وعلى أزواجه وذريته كما باركت على آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم صل على محمد والنبي وأزواج أمهات المؤمنين وذريته وأهل بيته كما صليت على إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وترحم على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما ترحمت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى ال محمد كما باركت على ابراهيم وعلى ال ابراهيم انك حميد مجيد اللهم ترحم على محمد وعلى ال محمد كما ترحمت على ابراهيم وعلى ال ابراهيم انك حميد مجيد اللهم تحنن على محمد وعلى ال محمد كما تحننت على ابراهيم وعلى ال ابراهيم انك حميد مجيد اللهم سلم على محمد وعلى ال محمد كما سلمت على ابراهيم وعلى ال ابراهيم انك حميد مجيد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى ال محمد وبارك وسلم على محمد وعلى ال محمد وارحم محمد وعلى محمد كما صليت وباركت وترحمت على ابراهيم وعلى ال ابراهيم في العالمين انك حميد مجيد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى ال محمد كما صليت على ابراهيم وعلى ال ابراهيم انك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى ال محمد كما باركت على ابراهيم وعلى ال ابراهيم انك حميد مجيد اللهم صل على محمد عبده ورسولك كما صليت على ال ابراهيم وبارك على محمد وعلى ال محمد كما باركت على ال ابراهيم انك حميد مجيد اللهم صل على محمد النبي الامي وعلى ال محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وبارك على محمد النبي الأمي كما باركت على إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم صل على محمد عبده ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آل محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد صلاة تكون لك رضا والوجزاء ولحقه أداء وعاطه الوسيلة والفضيلة والمقام محمود الذي وعدته واجزيه عنا ما هو أهل واجزيه أفضل ما جازيت نبيا قومه وسنن أمته وصل على جميع إخوانه من النبيين والصالحين يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم صل على محمد النبي الأمي وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم وبارك على محمد النبي الأمي وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيته كما صليت على إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم صل علينا معهم اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى أهل بيته كما باركت على إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك علينا معهم صلوات الله وصلوات المؤمنين على محمد النبي الأمي اللهم اجعل صلواتك ورحمتك وبركاتك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما جعلت على آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد وصلى الله على النبي الأمي وتحيات الله والصلوات والطيبات السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله التحيات الطيبات الصلوات لله السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله التحيات لله الطيبات الصلوات لله السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. التحيات المباركات الصلوات الطيبات لله. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. بسم الله بالله تحيات الله والصلوات والطيبات. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. أسأل الله الجنة وأعوذ بالله من النار. التحيات لله الزاكيات لله الطيبات الصلوات لله. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. بسم الله بالله خير اسماء التحيات الطيبات الصلوات لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. أرسله بالحق بشيرا ونذيرا وأن الساعة آتية لا ريب فيها. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. اللهم اغفر لي واهدني. التحيات الطيبات والصلوات والملك لله. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله التحيات لله الصلوات لله الزاكيات لله. السلام على النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. شهدت أن لا إله إلا الله شهدت أن محمدا رسول الله. التحيات الطيبات الصلوات الزاكيات لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأن محمدا عبده ورسوله. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. التحيات الطيبات الصلوات الزاكيات لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبد الله ورسوله. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. التحيات الصلوات لله. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. التحيات لله الصلوات الطيبات. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. التحيات المباركات الصلوات الطيبات لله. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. بسم الله والسلام على رسول الله. اللهم إنا نسألك من خير ما سألك من نبيك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم ونعوذ بك من شر ما استعاذ من نبيك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وأنت المستعان عليك ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. يا رب صل وسلم دائما أبدا على حبيبك خير الخلق كلهم. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك. لا إله إلا الله. جزاك الله خير.
The one who came from defense in Holland, Bani Israel, it was Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Salul. Did he ever